In 2021, customs officials at an airport in Malaysia opened a shipping crate labeled as cashew nuts. Inside, they found something else entirely: scales, thousands of them, stacked like roof tiles, still reeking of blood and formaldehyde. They belonged to pangolins, and they were worth more per kilogram than ivory. The officials had stumbled onto a trade network so vast, so profitable, that it had turned the world's most trafficked mammal into something most people had never heard of. A creature covered entirely in the same component as your fingernails. A mammal with no teeth that survives by swallowing stones. An animal whose only defense against lions is to curl into a ball and wait. It shouldn't work. None of it should work. And yet, for millions of years, the pangolin has persisted using strategies that seem almost deliberately inefficient. This isn't a story about an animal perfectly adapted to its environment. It's about an animal that survives, despite violating nearly every rule we associate with mammalian success. The pangolin belongs to the order Pholidota, containing only one family, Manidae, and 8 living species. 4 in Africa, 4 in Asia. Taxonomically, they're most closely related to carnivores, sharing a common ancestor with cats, dogs, bears, and seals, roughly 80 million years ago, which makes their current lifestyle, eating nothing but insects, even stranger. They're built on a carnivore chassis, but operate like something else entirely. The pangolin is the only mammal on Earth fully covered in keratin scales. Armadillos have bony plates covered by thin keratin. Reptilian scales are relatively flat. Pangolin scales are different, thick, sharp-edged, overlapping like roof tiles in a pattern that creates both protection and mobility. Each scale is attached at the base only, allowing the tip to move independently. They're angled backward so that when a predator bites down, the scales don't just resist, they cut. The edges slice into gums and tongues, making each bite more painful than the last. These overlapping plates account for up to 20% of the animal's total body weight. But keratin doesn't regenerate the way bone does. Crack a scale, chip an edge, and the damage is permanent. The pangolin's entire defense system is finite. So when a predator approaches, the pangolin doesn't fight. Instead, it curls into a ball, tucking its face beneath its tail. The curl happens in roughly 2 to 3 seconds, fast enough to respond to threats, but not instantaneous. And there's a blind spot, the gap where the head tucks under the tail, sealed by muscular tension, but not by armor. Lions have tried to pry them open. Leopards have bitten down with enough force to crack bone. Hyenas have rolled them off cliffs, hoping the impact would break the seal. And still, the pangolin remains closed through restraint. It's a survival strategy built on doing absolutely nothing and hoping the predator gets bored first. Against lions and leopards, the defense is nearly perfect. Against humans who can simply pick up a curled pangolin and carry it away, the defense is completely useless. And there's another human threat the pangolin never evolved to handle. Electric fences kill an estimated 1,000 pangolins yearly in South Africa alone. When a pangolin encounters one, it curls into a ball on contact. The continuous shock keeps the muscles contracted. It can't uncurl, can't escape. It stays locked in position until it dies from exhaustion or cardiac arrest. A defense mechanism perfected over millions of years, turned into a fatal liability by a technology that's been around for barely a century. Beneath those scales lies skin that's unusually thick and fibrous, almost leather-like, dense, tough, built to withstand punishment. But it's not pain-resistant. The pangolin feels every bite, every sting, every spray of formic acid. The thick skin doesn't numb the sensation. It just prevents the damage from being immediately fatal, which means the pangolin doesn't feed in comfort. It feeds in agony, because the pangolin hunts prey that fights back. Ants and termites, millions of them, living in fortified colonies with soldier castes, chemical weapons, and alarm systems. Fire ants inject venom. Certain termite species spray noxious chemicals. Others bite with mandibles strong enough to draw blood. The pangolin walks directly into these colonies and does something that borders on suicidal. It closes its eyes. It seals its ears completely. The 2 most vulnerable points on its body, now deliberately shut against the onslaught, but the nostrils remain open. The pangolin navigates by smell, and closing the nostrils would mean losing its primary sense. so the nostrils constrict to narrow slits, and the nasal passages produce thick mucus that traps insects before they can penetrate deeper. Then it begins feeding. Insects swarm over its face, biting, stinging, spraying acid. The thick skin absorbs the damage but doesn't block the pain. The pangolin endures because it has no choice. It can't see, it can't hear. It navigates entirely by smell and touch, tongue extended, collecting hundreds of insects per minute while under sustained attack. And occasionally, the tongue encounters something it can't tolerate. When that happens, the pangolin ties its tongue in a knot, using muscular contraction to squeeze off the unwanted substance before continuing to feed. But it doesn't stay long. 3 to 5 minutes at most. Then the pangolin retreats. Not because it's full, because staying longer would be fatal. And here's the deeper logic. The pangolin rotates feeding sites, never depleting a single colony. It's about sustainability. By taking only a fraction of the colony's population, the pangolin ensures the nest can regenerate for the next feeding cycle. It's farming without awareness, resource management without understanding, which has ecological implications. Pangolins are one of the few animals that specialize in controlling ant and termite populations. Remove pangolins from an ecosystem, and those populations explode. Termite damage to structures increases. Agricultural pests multiply. In regions where pangolin populations have collapsed, farmers report increased termite damage to crops and buildings. Before moving on, the pangolin has to deal with insects still clinging to its body. So it shakes violently, scales rattling, dislodging insects with kinetic force. Then it rubs against trees and rocks. Only when the insects are gone does it open its eyes and ears and move to the next site. The pangolin's tongue is longer than its entire body. In some species, it can extend up to 40 centimeters from a body that's only 60 centimeters long. But the tongue doesn't rest in the mouth. It's anchored deep in the chest cavity, extending down toward the pelvis. When not in use, it coils inside the pangolin's torso like a biological fire hose. During feeding, the tongue shoots out coated in saliva, so adhesive that insects have no chance of escape. Hundreds of ants consumed per minute, all swallowed whole, alive, still biting and stinging as they travel into the stomach. Inside the pangolin's body is a stomach unlike any other mammal, thick-walled, muscular, lined with keratinized ridges that function like a mill. But the pangolin takes it further. It intentionally swallows stones, small rocks, grit, sand. These stones tumble with each muscular contraction, crushing the exoskeletons of ants and termites into digestible fragments. Strong stomach acids do the rest, breaking down tissue, neutralizing toxins, dissolving chitin. And here's the elegant part. The pangolin doesn't consciously seek out stones. It happens incidentally during feeding. As the tongue sweeps across the ground collecting insects, it picks up grit and pebbles. The system is self-regulating. The pangolin navigates the world through smell. Its vision is poor, nearly useless. Hearing is functional but limited. But its sense of smell is extraordinary. The pangolin can detect active insect colonies underground, distinguish between species, estimate colony size, all through olfaction alone. And smell serves another critical function. Finding a mate. Pangolins are solitary creatures. They don't form social groups, so they rely on scent marking, chemical signals left on trees, rocks, and soil that communicate reproductive status across distances. A male can detect a female in estrus from remarkable distances, following scent trails that might be days old. The entire reproductive cycle happens through olfaction. Two animals meeting in darkness, guided entirely by smell. Pangolins typically give birth to a single pup after roughly 4 to 5 months of gestation. The pango pup is born with scales, but they're soft, pliable, rubber-like, completely useless as armor. Within 48 to 72 hours, the scales begin to harden. Within 2 to 4 weeks, they become functional. During those early weeks, the pup rides on its mother's tail, not her back, her tail. When danger approaches, the mother curls around the pup, enclosing it at the center of her armored ball. It's a defense strategy that offers no escape route. The mother doesn't run. She doesn't fight. She simply holds her position and waits. In parts of Africa, the pangolin occupies a space that transcends biology. In Zimbabwe, Among the Shona people, pangolins are associated with royalty, with chiefs, with ancestral messages. Sightings are interpreted as omens. Killing a pangolin without ritual permission is believed to bring catastrophe. Legally, pangolins are specially protected in Zimbabwe. In 2022, a man named Munashe Maphosa was sentenced to 9 years in prison for pangolin-related crimes. He didn't participate in trafficking. He didn't poach the animal. He simply accompanied a friend who had a pangolin in his possession. 9 years for association. However, the ruling was overturned in January 2026, ruling that he had been wrongly treated as a criminal despite believing the trade was legal. The sentence was meant to send a message. It didn't work, because the real threat isn't local tradition. It's an international demand. The pangolin is the most trafficked mammal on Earth. Between 2000 and 2019, over 1 million pangolins were poached from the wild. The trade operates across Africa and Asia, with animals captured in Nigeria, Cameroon, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, then smuggled to consumer markets in China and Vietnam. The Asian pangolin populations are nearly gone. The Chinese pangolin is functionally extinct in most of its former range. The Sunda pangolin has vanished from vast stretches of Southeast Asia. With Asian populations decimated, traffickers have turned to Africa, and African pangolin populations are next. Scales are worth more than ivory in some black markets. They're used in traditional medicine, despite having exactly the same medicinal properties as chewing your own fingernails, which is to say, none. Ground into powder, boiled into tonics, sold as cures for ailments ranging from arthritis to cancer. But scales aren't the only product. Pangolin meat is considered a delicacy in some regions, a status symbol. Restaurants in China and Vietnam have served pangolin dishes for thousands of dollars per plate, not because the meat tastes exceptional, because it's rare, because it's illegal, because consuming it signals wealth. In 2019, Singapore Customs seized 14 tons of pangolin scales in a single shipment. 14 tons, representing approximately 36,000 individual pangolins. Dead, processed, reduced to a commodity. The irony is brutal. An animal revered as sacred in one context is dismembered for profit in another. But there are people fighting back. Organizations like the Pangolin Conservation Foundation and Save Pangolins work to rehabilitate rescued pangolins and combat poaching networks. Rehabilitation centers take in pangolins confiscated from traffickers. Many arrive malnourished, injured, traumatized. The survival rate is low because pangolins often refuse to eat in captivity. They simply stop eating, starving themselves rather than adapting. Anti-poaching units patrol protected areas using camera traps, drones, and GPS tracking. Some organizations work with local communities, providing alternative livelihoods. Education campaigns aim to reduce demand. The message is simple. Pangolin scales have no medicinal value. Consuming pangolin meat doesn't confer status. It contributes to extinction. The pangolin doesn't survive through strength. It survives through restraint. It doesn't dominate its environment. It navigates carefully, knowing exactly when to stop. Its armor is protective but finite. Its feeding strategy is effective but limited by sustainability. Its reproduction is slow but sustainable in stable environments. The pangolin is a creature built on thresholds, on boundaries, on the understanding that survival isn't about winning. It's about not losing. It's a strategy that's kept the pangolin alive for millions of years, outlasting countless species that were faster, stronger, more aggressive. The pangolin walks the earth covered in fingernails, swallowing stones, curling into a ball in 2 seconds flat, feeding blind and deaf while feeling every sting, tying its tongue in knots, finding mates through scent alone, rotating feeding sites to ensure future meals, maintaining ecological balance through predation. And somehow, against all logic, despite being the most trafficked mammal on the planet, despite having a defense system that works perfectly against every predator except the one that matters, despite electric fences turning their survival instinct into a death sentence, it's still here, barely. The Asian populations are nearly gone. The African populations are next, and when the pangolins disappear, the ecosystems they maintain will shift in ways we're only beginning to understand. But it doesn't have to end this way. If this story moved you, support organizations like the Pangolin Conservation Foundation and Save Pangolins. Share this video. Spread awareness. The pangolin survives in the shadows, and the only way to save it is to bring it into the light. If you want to dive deeper into the world's most bizarre creatures, hit subscribe. We're exploring the biological impossibilities that science is still trying to explain. And if you thought the pangolin was strange, wait until you see what we're covering next.